In this video, I'm going to talk about some advice you can take from people who went through these job interviews. And I'm going to basically talk about some useful things you could ask if you know such people who went through these interviews, and some things you should take with a grain of salt if you're reading and if you're taking this advice. So the first thing I like to talk about here is probably the most useful thing you could do if you know someone who's been through this, or if you can ask someone who's been through these interviews, is for recommendations of people or sources which play the role to their interview success. It could be a YouTube channel, could be an interview coach, or could be just a book, right? But recommendations is something which are hugely useful. Now, on the not so useful side of things would be if someone tells you, I didn't have to prepare all that much, I basically only refreshed my memory and I was good to go. And whenever you hear this commentary, you should understand that there's a lot more to that. There's a lot more context to these things, because in my experience, it's rare to hear from a candidate to say, I didn't prep at all, if they had 6 months to prepare for a job interview, whereas it's far more likely for a candidate to say they didn't prepare on a short notice interview, right? Because if you have 3 days to prepare, you're far less likely to do so, right? Or a candidate who's been successful, you should also keep in mind that an employer who's creating a new team is far more likely to onboard new candidates, whereas an employer looking for a replacement role who they couldn't fill for the past 2 years, that's going to be a bit slightly more complicated. And maybe just one more here. It's one thing if someone tells you that they easily passed their interview 2 years ago when, interest rates were low and, everyone was on a hiring spree, when compared to today's employer-driven market, when, it's significantly tougher, right? Maybe another useful thing you could do if you know someone who passed through these job interviews, or who works there ideally, would be to help you with a reference for your job application, in a bit to help you to get through those screening rounds more efficiently. This what I also found it could be highly beneficial, with the note that it will only get you this far, that is the final interview rounds. It never works for the final interview rounds, but it does help you if you know someone to give you a reference for the screening rounds to be more likely to pass them. Now, another type of advice which you should take with a grain of salt is when you see interview answers for various types of questions. What you should understand here is answers wildly differ, not only by seniority, but also by the type of role you're applying for. Simplest, classic, most dumb example here is a software development engineer will never answer questions in the same ways as for a director or a general manager role. Now, if you think this is obvious, nobody would do this, then believe me, after reading thousands of stories and working with thousands of people, it's a hugely common trend for people to try to look more senior than they actually were, or from people applying for individual contributor roles to use examples from a manager level role primarily, right? So the types of the seniority and the type of the role is hugely important when taking into account as to what makes a great interview answer, right? So when you see this online, also document. Now, what's useful, another useful scenario for if you know someone who's been through this process and ideally successfully, but not necessarily, would be to role play with them, to role play a little bit for your job interview. Even better if someone knowledgeable about the type of role you're applying for, because this usually helps you to build up your interviewing skills, and also it's a bit of moral support, and motivation is another big one these days as well. Now, another thing I'd like to touch upon here would be when you see someone sharing the questions they got asked during the job interview, even for the same type of role. What happens here is that, especially for these major types of corporations, geography will greatly impact the questions you're getting asked, even the complexity of the questions you're getting asked. And another important thing you should keep in mind is when you see a list with 5 questions, and you basically go that way to only prepare those 5 questions, you're preparing on a very narrow behavioral spectrum. This is when compared to preparing a story bank, which is on the overall behavioral spectrum, right? So it's one thing to prepare top 5 most commonly asked interview questions, so that to prepare the 5 different types of questions you might get asked in job interviews, right? It's wildly different. And in my experience, I've been able to successfully correlate interview success with preparing story banks, right? So as compared to preparing all lists with most commonly asked questions, to prepare a story bank, and you're significantly more likely to pass that job interview. And last but not least, if someone advising you on job interviews is someone who passed that interview 10 years ago, you should know that the quality, the types of expectations have greatly changed since, because for instance, 10 years ago you had to pay thousands of dollars just to know the types of questions you might get asked in the job interview, whereas today you're just one Google search or one ChatGPT query away to find that out. So you can imagine the quality, the bar has significantly raised since. So these are the scenarios I wanted to share with you to help you to understand a little bit and to help you to boost the probabilities here of using quality advice and quality content to be successful in your upcoming job interview. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.